The greatest depression in the history of mankind has begun. It will destroy civilization as we know it. Financial collapse will knock down the Euro-American Imperium. War will sweep the globe, and yes, it is a globe, killing millions. Starvation and disease will kill even more, and from the rubble, the Man of Fierce Countenance, also known as the Antichrist, will rise to impose a far more efficient New World Order than we have now, and stamp it with his own special mark. But how did we get here? How did we get stuck in such an insane rush towards apocalypse? Well, it starts with the tragic tale of a young woman named Huang YanLing. Welcome to the Shockcast. I'm John Little, recording on a pleasant Tainan evening on Monday, April, 27th, 2020. Before going on, hit subscribe and click that bell to receive a notification when the next Shockcast happens. And if you like what you hear, hit that like button. All of that really helps get visibility for Omega Shock and the Shockcast. And if you didn't like it, well, you know what to do. And if you want to help keep Omega Shock alive with a donation, there's a link below that will help you do that. And believe me, from the bottom of my heart, I thank all of you who have given what you could, and I really appreciate that. Also, subscribe to the Shock Letter and receive my articles in your inbox at theshockletter.com. You can also find my posts on Facebook and Twitter. I have 2 books that you can read for free, and they are called When Jacob Returns and Ezekiel's Fire. You can find links for all of that below. Now let's get back to today's topic. How we got here, Part 1. The tragic tale of Huang YanLing and COVID-19. The tragic death of a young woman and the cover-up of her death is at the core of this story, but talking about just that fateful moment in time would be doing ourselves a disservice. To see the real beginning of our story and the pandemic it caused, we must go back to the beginning. And it starts with fear in 2003. The 2002 to 2004 SARS outbreak that began in China's Guangdong province caught the Chinese Communist Party completely by surprise. Then, as now, the local government suppressed the information, but when word of this outbreak reached Beijing, the Chinese Communist Party stepped in with its own efforts at information suppression. They didn't warn the international community. They didn't even warn their own people. And the virus swept through China and into the rest of Asia for months before Beijing changed their strategy. From November 2002 until April of 2003, the Chinese Communist Party did their very best to suppress any and all information about the SARS outbreak. Only when international criticism got too hot for them did they start to open up about what was really happening. By then, it was too late to stop the backlash, both inside China and internationally. Such loss of face is a big deal in China, with much greater ramifications than similar events in other countries. Hu Jintao had just taken over as head of the Chinese Communist Party from Jiang Zemin, also known as the Toad. It was an inauspicious start for Hu, and many would have seen this as something less than the mandate of heaven. The Chinese Communist Party is only as strong as its appearance of strength in the eyes of the average Chinese, and the failure to contain SARS was a visible sign of weakness. So, the Chinese Communist Party sent a team of scientists to track down the source of the SARS virus and even invited international help. One of the Chinese scientists on that team was this woman, Li. She had just received her PhD from Université Montpellier II in France in 2000, and now she was hunting for a virus in Guangdong. At the same time that Dr. Xi and her colleagues were hunting for SARS, China was negotiating with France to help them build their first Biosafety Level 4, BSL-4, laboratory in China, in Wuhan, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They began building the lab in 2005 and completed it in 2015. That's an important date, so try to remember it. We'll be talking about its significance later. But back to the search for SARS in Guangdong. In 2003, they discovered the SARS coronavirus in masked palm civets, in those wet markets in Guangdong that sold live animals that would be used for food. Unfortunately, if you know how the Chinese in Guangdong often cook such animals, you would understand how the virus jumped from undercooked civets to humans. Boiling an animal alive is evil. And yes, that is exactly what they like to do. They claim that the meat tastes better if the animal suffers terribly as it dies. I was horrified to find this out, and now you get to be horrified too. After looking closely at the virus found in the civets, they discovered that SARS could not have originated with the civet. So they looked further and discovered in 2005 that it originated in bats. And it took another 12 years to discover which bats and the caves where they came from. That 12-year search earned Dr. Li the nickname Batwoman. Who were the culprits? These guys. That is the Chinese rufous horseshoe bat, or Rhinolophus sinicus. And as you can see, they are not the prettiest of God's creatures. I'd rather have a cat than a bat any day. But there's a problem with the coronavirus that they found in these bats. It came all the way from Yunnan province, more than 600 miles away from Guangdong province. And we still aren't sure how SARS was able to travel that far without infecting humans along the way. But that's less important than what else they found. Here's a quote from Nature.com in 2017 that is more than a little chilling. Quote, Kui and Shi are searching for other bat populations that could have produced strains capable of infecting humans. The researchers have now isolated some 300 bat coronavirus sequences, most not yet published, which they will continue to monitor the virus's evolution. And they warn that a deadly outbreak could emerge again. The cave where the elements of SARS were found is just 1 kilometer from the nearest village, and genetic mixing among the viral strains is fast. The risk of spillover into people and emergence of disease similar to SARS is possible, the authors write in their paper. Close quote. From That Cave Solves Mystery of Deadly SARS Virus and Suggests New Outbreak Could Occur. And that was published on December 1st, 2017. They found more than 300 strains of the coronavirus in bats in southern China. That's a lot of coronavirus and a lot of risk, and their warning of a risk of spillover into people was more than justified. Unfortunately, the current spillover appears to have come to us via a lab accident, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The above quote came from Nature.com, and it was literally 2 years before the Wuhan coronavirus pandemic started. But that's 2017. We need to roll back the clock a bit to see another key event that was happening 3 years earlier in 2014. The following sentence is from Dr. Li's Wikipedia page. Quote, in 2014, Li was involved in bat coronavirus gain-of-function experiments led by Ralph S. Baric of University of North Carolina, finding that SARS had the potential to reemerge from coronavirus circulating in the bat populations in the wild, close quote. That research led to this discovery, titled, 2 mutations were critical for bat-to-human transmission of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. That was really great to know, since it helps us understand where the next outbreak could occur, but there's a problem. That discovery was the result of gain-of-function research, often known as GOF. What is gain-of-function research? Here's the definition. Quote, gain-of-function research involves experimentation that aims or is expected to, and or perhaps actually does, love that English, increase the transmissibility and or virulence of pathogens, basically bad bugs. Such research, when conducted by responsible scientists, usually aims to improve understanding of disease-causing agents, their interaction with human hosts, and or their potential to cause pandemics. The ultimate objective of such research is to be better informed of public health and preparedness efforts and or development of medical countermeasures, close quote. from gain-of-function research and ethical analysis. Basically, the purpose is to increase the lethality of a virus or bacteria to see how we can defend ourselves from it. It also helps us figure out how many mutation steps might be needed to make such a microbe so deadly, which might tell us how soon we might see a bad bug happen. In the case of the coronavirus that caused the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, it was just 2 mutation steps, but the danger of gain-of-function research are high, very high. So high, in fact, that Barack Obama banned U.S. government funding for gain-of-function research in 2014. Now, do you remember the date for the completion of the BSL-4 lab for the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Right, 2015. With the U.S. government money cut off for gain-of-function research, it would have been natural for China to pick up where the U.S. left off. After all, gain-of-function research is exactly what biosafety level 4 labs are built for. And China wanted to figure out how to deal with this SARS coronavirus. And by 2017, they were getting results. Inspired by their ability to mutate coronaviruses, Dr. Shi and her team of researchers started gain-of-function research in their own research lab in Wuhan. Dr. Shi had already been able to mutate coronaviruses to replicate the highly lethal MERS. Now her team was going to work on mutating and analyzing these coronavirus strains to anticipate the next SARS outbreak. Unfortunately, there's a huge problem with the idea of Chinese scientists doing gain-of-function research in China. The research labs in China have an appalling history of making deadly mistakes. In April of 2004, a lab accident infected a postgraduate student and a researcher, leading to a minor outbreak of SARS in Beijing. Then, a month later, a second lab accident led to another small outbreak of SARS in that same city. China had sloppy lab safety, and that sloppiness carried right over to the new lab at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The U.S. Embassy in Beijing became concerned about what was going on in the lab in Wuhan, so they sent several science officials to the lab in 2018. What they saw deeply disturbed them, so much so that they sent 2 urgent diplomatic cables to Washington, D.C. to sound the alarm. One of those cables stated the following, quote, "During the interactions with the scientists at the Wuhan Institute of Virology laboratory, they noted the new lab has a serious shortage of appropriately trained technicians and investigators needed to safely operate this high-containment laboratory," close quote. As from the State Department cables warned of safety issues at Wuhan Lab studying bat coronaviruses from the Washington Post. The biosafety level 4 lab at the Wuhan Institute of Virology was an accident waiting to happen. And more than a year later, I and many others believe that a lab accident at the institute led to the infection of researchers and students. Many believe that this resulted in the tragic death of Huang YanLing of COVID-19 and a pandemic that sweeps the world today. How do we know? Well, I first heard about Huang YanLing from someone that I had been following for years on YouTube. Matthew Tai, Laowei86, and his friend Winston Sturzel, Serpent ZA, had been living and reporting in China, offering a snapshot of life there that you don't normally see. And I particularly loved their collaboration called ADV China. It was interesting. It was insightful. They had spent more than a decade in China, had Chinese wives, and were generally pleased with life in China. That is, until the Chinese Communist Party started putting heavy pressure on foreigners. Eventually, they were forced to take their families and leave for the United States. When that happened, they were finally able to report on the darker side of China, something that they had been unable to do while they were on the inside. Then one of the videos that came out recently was this one. "I found the source of the coronavirus" is the title. That's Matthew Tai, and he presents the most logical, factual, and responsible explanation for the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic that I had heard to date. And it focuses on the death and cover-up of a young woman named Huang YanLing. We don't know that much about her because all trace of her was scrubbed from the Chinese internet. And what we do know is available because of a very diligent search for her in early February. Once people realized that she was missing, the news swept the Chinese internet within days and even made it to my favorite Taiwanese news station on February 16th. Yep, Taiwan has a news station called TVBS. I love that name, since I consider most television to be bull squat. They were also the station that my local doctor had on all the time, and since I visited him often in his waiting room, and the number of horrifying traffic accidents that I saw on that channel made me feel good about not owning a car or a scooter. You're safe in Taiwan as long as you don't drive or cross the street. Now, how do we know that Miss Huang existed and worked at the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Well, her name is on research reports coming out of that institute, and the institute never deletes anyone who has ever worked there. Everyone who has ever been named in a published report coming from the institute has their name pictured and bio on their website. No exceptions except 3. Huang YanLing, Wang Mengyu, Wei Kuihua. I found those other 2 names here. It's from the article called The Trail Leading Back to the Wuhan Labs on the nationalreview.com. I don't know anything about the disappearance of Mr. Wang or Mr. Wei, but they too might also have gotten infected and died. I just don't know. But they probably didn't get as much traction in the media because, well, they're guys. Attractive young women who disappear mysteriously will always have much more dramatic value. Now, when the search for Miss Huang got a little too hot for the Wuhan Institute of Virology, they released a statement claiming that Miss Huang never got the virus and is alive and well in another province. They said that she left in 2015. Unfortunately, there's a problem with their proclamation of innocence. They lied. Here is Miss Huang, inset in black border with a group of researchers and students at the Institute. It was their New Year 2018 group photo. Above the picture, it says that there were 6 lab researchers and 13 students. Translation courtesy of Mrs. Little. Was she one of the 6 researchers? Did she go to work for the Institute after she graduated in 2015? Or was she still a student working on her PhD? Was she both? It certainly looks like one of those. Then there are some interesting dates. On November 18th, 2019, the Institute posted a job opening for scientists to come research the relationship between the coronavirus and bats. And then a month later, they posted another job opening that was similar, but more emphatic. That second posting was described like this: long-term research on pathogenic biology of bats carrying important viruses has confirmed the origin of bats of major new human and livestock infectious diseases such as SARS and SADS. And a large number of new bat and rodent new viruses have been discovered and identified. Close quote. They already had a large team working on that, so it seems to make little sense that they would need new people unless those job slots had opened up in a rather tragic and deadly way. Did Huang YanLing get infected and die in November? Or did she die in December? Unfortunately, none of that is absolute proof. It is possible that Huang YanLing, Wang Mengyu, and Wei Kuihua were disappeared for completely different reasons. Maybe they knew too much. Maybe they died under different circumstances than the ones that we are considering. Again, I haven't looked into Wang and Wei, so I can only speak about Miss Huang. Did she file a sexual harassment complaint against her boss? Was she suicided? Was her disappearance due to something completely different because she was being blackballed? That last one does happen a lot in China. For instance, if you become a Christian, they will often throw you out of school and or your job because simply because you committed your life to Christ. But I'm sorry, that just doesn't add up. If she had disappeared under such benign circumstances, the Chinese Communist Party would have quickly gotten pictures and video from her to quash these rumors that just won't die. But let's try to keep an open mind. How else could this bat virus get from Guangdong to Wuhan in Hubei province? There is another lab in Wuhan working on bat coronaviruses. That lab is far less secure and is only a biosafety level 2 or BSL-2 laboratory, while the institute is a BSL-4. The less secure BSL-2 lab is a part of the Wuhan Centers for Disease Prevention and Control, also known as the WHCDC. That lab is only 900 feet from the Huanan seafood market, which was accused of being the source of the COVID-19 outbreak. Since it is a less secure facility with staff at a lower level of skill and training, accidents are more likely to occur at the Wuhan Centers for Disease Control than at the institute. And I find it ironic that a lot of alternative hoax media morons keep mixing up the Wuhan CDC with the Wuhan Institute for Virology. Someone doing research into this topic created a rather detailed webpage on GitHub. The research page is titled Evidence SARS-CoV-2 Emerged from a Biological Laboratory in Wuhan, China. I stumbled onto that webpage long after I had started this article, and it is full of excellent authoritative research. But because it's so good, China will try to find a way to have it taken down. Therefore, the authors have put their work into a zip file and encouraged everyone to download it and share it everywhere. The link to the original archive file is here. It's called archive.zip. And since that web page will eventually be taken down, I have downloaded and renamed and placed the archive on our own servers. That archive file is version 7.6 of their report. Please let me know if newer versions pop up, and I will try to get the latest archive. But let's get back to what they said about the traveling distance to the Huanan seafood market. Here are a couple of screenshots that they captured of what they found on Google Maps. The dangerous lab, the one the one for the Wuhan Centers for Disease Control is on the left, and the one for the Wuhan Institute of Virology is on the right. The dangerous lab at the institute is much farther away from the epicenter of the outbreak, yet the hysteria morons keep pointing to the less dangerous lab at the institute, at the Wuhan Centers for Disease Prevention and Control, and claiming that it's the bad one. Sorry, but the Wuhan Institute BSL-4 laboratory is almost 9 miles away from the Huanan seafood market. An accident at the institute would have had a harder time getting to the epicenter than if that accident occurred at the Wuhan CDC. Does this destroy the idea that Huang YanLing is patient zero? Not really. Yes, it might weaken the theory, but both labs were essentially working on the same project. We can imagine a lot of cross-pollination between them. Were bats and virus samples being transferred back and forth between the labs? Did Huang YanLing live nearby the Wuhan CDC lab while working at the institute? Did she work in both labs? The problem is that we don't have any reports or evidence pointing directly to the Wuhan CDC. Furthermore, the Wuhan CDC was not involved in gain-of-function research. But the Wuhan Institute of Virology certainly was. The Wuhan CDC seems to have been isolating the viruses but not attempting to mutate them, while the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the one making them more lethal. Did a mutated virus accidentally go from the Wuhan Institute of Virology to the Wuhan CDC? Did the accident that infected and killed Huang YanLing happen at the Wuhan CDC? Even though she was working for the institute? Where is Huang YanLing? Unfortunately, we have more questions than answers. But there is one thing that I would like the Chinese Communist Party right now to tell us. Where is Huang YanLing? This is part one in a series that will hopefully explain how we got to where we are. This will be a journey of discovery that will help us understand where we are going. I believe that the deadliest era in human history has begun. My hope is that you and I get through this with our ability to serve God intact. That's it for this Shockcast. If you appreciated this video, hit like, then hit subscribe and that little bell. Also leave a comment. I look forward to seeing what you have to say about what was said here. Your input is truly welcome. And again, if you want to keep Omega Shock and this Shockcast alive, there's a link below that can help you do that. And believe me, I really appreciate everyone who does. You can also get my articles and updates in your inbox through the Shock Letter at theshockletter.com and read my books for free. When Jacob Returns and Ezekiel's Fire. They just might save your life.